Hi and welcome. Joining me today is Edmund Adamus, who is education consultant with A Fertile Heart, and I'm sure you'll tell us more about that today. But I couldn't go through your CV, it's very extensive, but the common theme, Edmund, running through your work is the promotion of family values. So maybe if you could start by telling us a bit about the work that you do and that you've done in the past.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me, Catherine, to do some sharing. Really appreciate it. Gosh, where do I begin? I've had a long and extensive career across many different ministries within the church in this country, and different apostolates associated with marriage and family. I would say the vast chunk of that in the last 10 to 15 years has been as actually Director for Marriage and Family Life with the Archdiocese of Westminster, which was a job I had for best part of 14 years. And in that time, that was the main thrust of that was building up and promoting and establishing a whole new range of ministries that would not just support the pastoral care of marriage and the family in the parishes and obviously creating useful things that clergy and religious and laity alike could engage with, but it was specifically targeting improving and enhancing marriage preparation. And when I talk about marriage preparation, I'm talking about it in very broad terms as the church understands it. So obviously there's the engaged couple who we have to look after and prepare well for the celebration of the sacrament of marriage and their Christian Catholic married life. But actually, for a long time now, actually for a good 30 years or more, the broader definition of marriage preparation is in three phases: the remote, the proximate, and the immediate phases. So the remote would be, I would argue, from conception onwards, but from infancy up to adolescence and youth and young adulthood. Yeah. And your immediate phase, so that's all about formation, catechesis, education, etc. And your immediate phase would be probably your kind of your age group that would be involved with World Youth Days and that type of thing. So 16 up to 35, who may or may not be in committed relationships or are certainly aspiring to long-term relationships and marriage, and how are we preparing them to aspire to be inspired to aspire to lifelong marriage and family and everything else, which the vast majority of people by God's plan are called to. And then your immediate phase, as I say, your proximate and immediate phase then is the engaged couple. How do we care for them? And of course, as we know, there's been a lot of discussion and debate and dialogue about that, particularly in recent years with the synods on the family and the Pope Francis's document on Amoris Laetitia about how do we actually really wrap our arms around the engaged couple and really give them that great pastoral support so that they enter marriage confidently, securely, so that they'll make a good marriage and a lifelong marriage, given all of the pressures and strains that are on marriage and family from secular society around us, which are intensifying if as opposed to making life easier. So that's been a big thrust of my work the last for a big chunk of my time. And then there was kind of an interlude when in 2016 I was headhunted by the Diocese of Portsmouth. I was a long-standing friend of Bishop Philip Egan from time gone by, and I became, he appointed me as a schools commissioner, but also with an added emphasis on providing really good professional development and faith formation development for teachers, senior leaders, school governors, which would, if you like, embellish and articulate the church's vision for marriage and family and the new evangelization. So it was really a big part of that was standard support stuff that dioceses give to schools, but with an added emphasis on trying to help those in education have a new appreciation or even a fresh appreciation of the parent as the primary educator. Yeah. Now we say that all the time in our doctrine about Catholic education, and schools say it all the time in their mission statements and what have you. And saying it's one thing, but actually acting on it as a really concrete pastoral reality is another thing. And it's a constant challenge, because again, schools are trying to operate in a culture and a society where all too often, the authority of parents, the moral authority of parents, is questioned and completely undermined and subverted, and schools can sometimes be sucked into that, culture of subversion, unwittingly perhaps, but nevertheless they have to guard against it. So a lot of my work with schools in that period of time, which was 2016 to 2019, and now beyond, has been about just encouraging those in school leadership and faith formation and Catholic identity and mission in education to just maybe think a little bit more creatively about the relationship with parents, and being vigilant about the delicate balance of that relationship in the educational pact, as it were, because otherwise the anti-parent voices will dominate the narrative, and it's not healthy at all. And so more recently then, since I moved away from Portsmouth, I became involved with the Fertile Heart Project, which you mentioned at the beginning. And that's a new and, well, relatively new, it's been around now since 2017. That's an innovative and groundbreaking approach to relationships and sexuality formation. I always hesitate to say relationships and sex education, which is the standard secular descriptor.
At least you're getting the R first.
Yes, the R's in there at last, and should always have been. But so the relationships and sexuality formation program, if you like, which is Fertile Heart, is again, it's an additional offer to schools to help them with good Catholic approach to RSE or RSHE. But again, with added value. It's not just, this is just a Catholic thing, appendix to what the state wants. It's actually about, right through from age 5 to 16, it's an entire formational pedagogy about the dignity of the person, about what's freedom, what is moral agency, what is, and so it kind of, and it's all flavored very much and dependent upon the vision of the human person, the theology of the human person of St. John Paul II's theology of the body, his catechesis on human love. And it's a highly developed program now. As I say, it's all through. It wasn't all through for several years, but now it's from reception right through to 16, and it's it's books, but it's also beautifully developed online resources for teachers to use, and now actually we're marketing it to parents as well. I've used it myself with my own children, and I'm not a trained teacher, so. And it's all speaking into that space of, come on, parents, if you're the primary educators, you are the teachers, the first and best of teachers of your children. No one loves your child like you love your child. No one knows your child like you know your child. You can do this. These resources, you don't have to be theologically articulate. You don't have to be, trained in pedagogy. And in exploring these materials with your child, you're actually going to help form yourself as well. So, and we've had some great feedback from parents who've used it, and we've got great feedback from teachers and schools as well. Not enough, because we're not out there big enough in terms of a market, but hopefully that will change. We've had a lot of interest from as far away as Australia, which has been great. And it's, it's all in God's hands. Obviously, like everything in life, we were negatively impacted by COVID and the pandemic, and particularly working with schools and education because of the partial closures and all of that. And bless them, schools have had so much to do, worrying about how they fulfill their RSE provision with respect, and I understand it, it's been probably at the bottom of their to-do list because they've just concentrated on coping and getting through this very tough period the last 2 years, and now what you might call a recovery phase, which is tougher still, because all of the difficulties that so many children have gone through in terms of their educational journey, the problems with that are now beginning to surface for a lot of teachers. And you talk to teachers and they're under no illusions about how long that journey is going to be of getting kids back up to speed, and for some children longer than others. So education, as you've alluded to, is a tough space to be in, and Catholic education, Christian education, tougher still because of the culture we live in. So that's been me in a nutshell for the last decade or more, and in more recent times.
Curriculums are quite squeezed. I think it is hard. You're trying to fit things in, but I think something like this is so important. I know that schools are making space for it and recognise the importance of it. And I'm familiar with that Fertile Heart programme. In fact, my friend, her dad worked on it quite a few years ago at the very embryonic stage, and I had to look at some of the materials then, and I agree. I think it's just such a fantastic programme. It's just beautiful, and it recognises that dignity as a human person. And as you say, if parents can look at it alongside their children as well, then that will help that formation both ways. And just to pick out a few things from what you were saying there, that only yesterday I did just a very quick kind of podcast about experts and how we sort of live in a world in which we feel, I don't know how it's happened, we feel like we have to outsource everything to experts. I mean, now even to the extent of artificial experts, artificial intelligence and so on. But we've sort of forgotten that we do actually have common sense. We do actually, we are created. We believe, obviously, we're created by God, and God has given us this natural law. This, if we just pay enough attention, and that's the problem. I don't think we're paying attention because our attention is drawn to so many other things, and we're distracted in so many other ways. But if we just calm down and slow down and pay attention to our nature, I think we will see that we don't need to outsource as much as we do to so-called experts. And teachers, definitely, I think, I really can identify with what you were saying about the importance of parents as first educators, but also how much they, they think the schools are the only, and the teachers the only people who can educate their children. And we, I know from many teachers in my family and friendship group who have said that it's got to the extent where parents come in and say to the school, what can you do? My son is playing video games all day, or, I can't get my child to do their homework, or even, how can I help them to eat properly? And it's great that they're communicating, but at the same time, there's this sense that the teachers will be able to answer this, and it's in the realm of the school to deal with it. And that lack of confidence that actually, that, as you say, parents are the first educators, and that should be there.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I think, well, two things. I think the reason why that that lack of confidence has arisen over, then this is a cumulative effect over decades of what I have to say is a rather twisted educational philosophy from certain quarters in the field, which is that parents are not the experts, that educators are the experts in formation and particularly intellectual formation. And so parents have kind of imbibed this message and drunk the Kool-Aid and thought, oh, well the school is the best, is the expert. No, the parent is always the expert in their child. No matter how remiss they might be as a parent, and we all make mistakes, they are the expert. The teacher, who knows the child very well because they see them a lot each day and every day and throughout the course of their educational journey, they have remarkable expertise in the child in their care, the children in their class, etc., etc. And it's about harnessing and cherishing and celebrating the expert and the expertise working together for the overall benefit of the child. And when that works well together, and there are great relationships between teacher and parents and school and parents, magic happens. We know that. And I think in some respects, maybe that's one of the blessings and unforeseen fruits of the pandemic, is that because a lot of parents literally had to, not quite homeschool, but to give it their best shot during lockdowns and things like that, they discovered this new level of confidence in themselves. And I think something unseen was speaking to them about, actually, it's been a challenge, but it's been quite a bit of fun, actually, pursuing maybe not formal educational activities with my children, but nonetheless educational stuff. And I think a lot of parents have discovered a new way of communicating with their children. New bonds have developed, or fresh energy has developed because of that, if you like, forced enclosure, if I can put it that way. But you're right. I think for those of us who come at these issues with the eyes of faith, with the lens of a theological perspective, and a spiritual mindset, you're right. It behooves us to kind of just take a step back from the business of life, which just gets increasingly busy all the time, and try and lower the thermostat, as it were, on all of the other things that demand our attention, and with both for ourselves and our children, so that we can just actually be there and kind of be in the presence of one another more. So that these gifts, these natural gifts and charisms that God has blessed us with by virtue of being spouses, parents, godparents, aunts, uncles, that these charisms can come to the surface more. And when we're faced with particular challenges, we're not daunted by them. They still remain a challenge, but they're not an insurmountable obstacle, because we're, as you say, we should be in more listening mode. Now that has to be about prayer, and but also, not being alone in the task. That's the great thing these days, isn't it, about the internet in particular, the kind of platform we're using now, is that there are just a myriad of really bright, fresh, creative, engaging, innovative internet-based apostolates that are just there, a supermarket shelf full of great things you can connect with, to deepen your own spirituality as a Christian man, Christian woman, husband, father, parent, but also for your family as well. It's just, the sky's the limit, really. There's so many brilliant things out there which can just stimulate, and obviously you can interact with others, knowing that someone in New Mexico or Durham or wherever in the world is posing the same questions to themselves as a parent, as a spouse, that you are, and you can interact with that in a really engaging way. I think is reassuring, because it is tough to be a Christian in the world. It's tougher still to be a Catholic, a serious Catholic or a seriously minded Catholic in the world, and it's not going to get easier. So we need each other, and if we can connect, like you and I are now, and further afield, with like-minded individuals who at least have a firm grasp of the church's vision and teaching about marriage and family life, and the centrality of the family in evangelization, then we stand a chance of facing that, threatening world with a bit more confidence and vigor, and not circling the wagons, though there are occasions when that's necessary. I always think going on a pilgrimage is a circling the wagons process, and it's absolutely fine and legitimate, and sometimes we need to do that, so that when we uncircle the wagons, we're in a better place to face whatever life throws at us. So it's it's just a constant challenge. The call to holiness is a constant challenge, but a good one.
Yeah, exactly. That's our ultimate purpose, isn't it? That's that idea of being saints. That is.
Yeah.
And what is my role as a parent is I'm looking after this child for God, and to try and help them on their journey to return to God. And so therefore, when I choose a school, I want the school to help me with that. And that's important because that there has to be that shared value. And again, going back to your program, it's there. It's there in that program to share that value between that aim as a Catholic parent, what they hope for their child, and the school will then help to fulfill that through that program.
Yeah, and I think initiatives like the Fertile Heart thing and other things is that it also enables the teacher and the school leadership, if they come at it with a fresh, rather than something they've got to, it's on the to-do list, because Ofsted's coming and the Section 48 is coming or whatever, but actually it's a central pillar of their mission and identity as a Catholic community that is a formational community for the children in their care, in partnership with parents. And that one of my stock phrases to teachers and leaders in education is that you're partners in a shared task with the parents. As you say, it's about ultimately what is education? What is Catholic education? Ultimately, yes, it part of it is nurturing the intellectual gifts, the intellectual nourishment and development of a child. And every child has gifts that are waiting to be brought forth. But the ultimate goal of Catholic education is to point that child to eternal life.
Yeah.
That's otherwise we're no different from the school next door. And the school next door is often fantastic. But if we're not fundamentally repeating that message of the metaphysical, of the transcendental, of our ultimate goal in life is not a great job with lots of money and material security, though those things are good in themselves. Our ultimate goal is actually to be with God in heaven. So whatever we get out of education and whatever Catholic education can bring to the young person, if the young person at the end of their educational journey is not fired up with that, well, whatever steps I now take in my life, the ultimate framework is my full union with God in the hereafter, then we've not done the job.
Yeah.
We simply haven't done the job properly. They must enter out into the world with spectacles that which remind them of the heavenly life, of eternal life, and life in Christ.
Yeah.
And I think there's ways of inspiring educators, parents, and teachers to think about that without getting embarrassed about it, without thinking, oh well, faith is a personal thing, and it's private. And no, it should be very emotional and communal.
Yeah.
And you can propose union with Christ. You don't impose it.
Yeah.
You're proposing it. You're proposing it, yes, by the educational content, the worship in school, the spirituality, and some schools work very hard at that and do a great job. But ultimately, it's the witness you give. As Pope Paul VI used to say, witness first, teacher second. And that's the same for parents as much as it is for professional teachers in the Catholic education field. So, and I think we constantly have to revisit that. It's not just a nice saying that trips off the tongue.
No.
You have to revisit that every day. What does that mean? How am I witnessing today? How am I, even when life is tough and, the stresses and strains of education and teaching is just, it's just an enormous, ever demanding task.
Yeah.
In the midst of all that, tension and strain, how do I keep, as a Catholic educator, how do I keep that still center?
Sure.
So that I'm emitting, a spirit of serenity amidst the chaos,
Yeah.
and the term. I'm emitting something of Christ to my pupils, to my colleagues, Catholic and non-Catholic colleagues, And leadership is a key part of that in the school. Absolutely essential part of that. The message has to cascade down and horizontally from the leadership, who are hopefully are people who really feel called to senior leadership because they have a sense of their apostolic vocation, and that they're deepening that life in themselves on a regular basis. But if that's not there, there's something lacking, and it can have an effect on the culture of a school, can't it?
Yeah. Also the thing is, young people really recognize authenticity. They see it, and I see how they respond, because when you work in a Catholic school, and I've worked in many Catholic schools, you will have some staff, because it's very difficult to recruit Catholic teachers or faithful Catholic teachers, and you will have staff, which is fine, who will agree to uphold the Catholic values. But as you talk about that witness, when a young person sees that those working in a Catholic school really try as best as possible to live what they say they believe, you can really tell whether those young people agree with it or not. There is that's kind of that recognition of authenticity and that respect for what they can see when it's just maybe lip service, or it's kind of which is where the formation of teachers as well comes in, is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And where in my experience, some might say limited experience in the formal Catholic education sector, where very often either the lapsed but well-motivated Catholic teacher, or the non-Catholic teacher, or even atheistic Catholic teacher, who's working in Catholic education and rubbing shoulders with and alongside a committed Catholic teacher who is just naturally witnessing in the way they work, in their professionalism, in their care, their pastoral sensitivity to their pupils, etc. They're catching something, and actually they themselves start to be inspired and feel called to become a Catholic, and that's where the Catholic school is often, as I said earlier, a formation center, and it's a force for evangelization, just by being the best it can be in its Catholic witness and identity, and never being ashamed of it. Being unapologetic Catholic is, it's not, yes, it can be a challenging space, but it's also, it's full of grace. Because we're saying, Lord, this is not our work, it's yours. And if you're saying that, all the time, then, hey, guess what? Then the Holy Spirit will actually do what he wants to do. So sometimes I think, and I get it's hard for schools in this country, our Catholic schools, our maintained schools in particular, they're so often dominated by a culture of compliance. They've got to tick this box, that box, all the rest of it, that they can lose sight of as I say, the apostolic quality of what they're about, because the bureaucracy of it all can just dominate and almost make you deviate from the script. Whereas actually there's a way of coming at all the compliance issues and the regulatory aspects of it with a spirit of a faithful spirit of service, yes, but also not allowing that to dominate. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, but to God what is God's. And that's the same in every walk of life, whatever career, whatever professional environment you're working in, as a committed Christian and Catholic. And you're not going to have that mindset, as you said earlier, Catherine. You're not going to have that mindset unless you're taking time, either certainly each day if you can, but regularly, to press the pause button, step back, readjust, allow God to speak in you and through you. And it doesn't have to be a big chunk of your day. Sometimes just a few moments of quiet or, recollection. And that's where schools that have chapels are, they're incredibly blessed to have chapels, especially if they've got the Blessed Sacrament in them.
Yeah.
It's worth 5 minutes of your lunch hour or a coffee break or whatever, just to simply pop in and spend a few moments with the Blessed Sacrament, even if it sounds like chaos outside the door. You're just recentering, and saying, you know what, Lord, I'm having a tough day, having a tough week. Actually, it's a tough term, but I'm here because you've called me here. So, or I've got this obstacle, or I've got this challenge, or whatever it is. I'm handing it over to you. Just keep surrendering. Surrendering to God, and as Pope Francis says, God is a God of surprises, and He is, and often those can be pleasant surprises. Sometimes they can be very unexpected surprises, but that's how God works as well. But you've got to roll with providence, haven't you? But never alone. That's the secret.
No, exactly.
Why do people? And coming back to the marriage and family life aspect, why do people enter into marriage? Yes, they fall in love and they want to spend the rest of their life with this person, and if God wills, have children with them. But why do we form a union? Because our hearts are made for communion. We're not made to be alone, or rather, we're not made to be lonely. There's nothing wrong with being alone at times in our life. Gosh, many a single person would tell you that singlehood or singleton is a vocation as well. But we're not called to struggle alone. Whatever the challenge, whatever the difficulty, either be at work or in family or whatever, being, as I said earlier, being part of a network, choosing your friends wisely, I think is such an incredibly important spiritual dimension of life. I think friendship is an often overlooked aspect, actually, of our Christian calling. At the end of the day, what was the church founded on? Jesus said, "I call you my friends." He founded it on these apostles, whom he called his friends. So I think there has to be almost a kind of new theology of friendship as well, which, when you think in terms of, the terribly tension-ridden and controversial laden discussion about marriage, family, sexuality, and all of that. Actually, if we just step back and say, well, can we talk about friendship in God for everybody? And it's kind of that, so we can start from a common denominator.
But also,
how are we all friends in Christ? And if we don't have a friendship with Christ as an individual, if we don't have an intimacy with Him, then we can't even begin to understand what authentic relationships might look like between husbands and wives, but parents and children, brothers and sisters, professional colleagues. I mean, it's every relationship, it's all relationships. But we look to the married relationship as an icon. One would say, John Paul would say, the icon of God's loving presence in the world. It's there as an exemplar of constant victimal love and sacrifice, so that there's elements of that in all relationships, in all types of communicating and service. And people know this instinctively, but they just need to hear it again and again and again, because, as you said, it's not that people don't believe it or don't want to believe it. They do, really, because that's the way God's made us. But they need a confidence boost, big time. And that that has to be worked at, especially by those in leadership, in ministries, either in the church, in parishes, dioceses, and education, all the time. How am I helping people's confidence in themselves, in their relationship with God, and actually how are we capturing people's imagination? Because I think there is a Catholic imagination. Sure. You've only got to read really good, great literature from the past. Great authors like G.K. Chesterton and Tolkien and so many others. I mean, the list is endless. In culture and literature, that fires up the imagination, that makes you want to kind of think, wow, the Christian message is such a beautiful, life-giving thing. How can I be part of that? And it gives me life, and how can I help it give life to others? and that's going to be different for different people. But that's the wonderful thing, isn't it? St. Paul talking about the variety of gifts. All the gifts matter, and recognizing the different gifts and charisms, and that sometimes, I was thinking about this recently, actually, because as I said before we started our interview, that I've been doing a lot of job hunting, job searching, and different at this point in my life. And actually, you think, well, what am I good at? What have I been good at? And it doesn't dawn. Well, it didn't dawn on me. I suppose it's a gradual awareness that actually, over time, God is so clever. You have particular charisms for a particular work that He wants you to do at that point in your life, and that might tail off as another one develops. Because it's His plan. It's His plan. And you've just got to learn to trust. Whilst of course always being proactive in your own development and formation, like your theological formation, your spiritual formation, but also your professional development. Acquiring new skills, hard skills for the work you've got to do or the work you want to do. That's all good, because it's all human flourishing. Learning a new language or learning an instrument or a new piece of software or whatever it is you've got to do to, upskill. That's all human flourishing. It's all cooperating with God's will for you.
That's it. Yeah. What in fact, while you were, I was just grabbed my phone to look up, because it just came to mind when you were talking earlier about, we're all called to do this work. It's not just people working in Catholic schools or in the church. And this quote from Saint Jose Maria, which I love: "You must understand now more clearly that God is calling you to serve Him in and from the ordinary, material and secular activities of human life. He waits for us every day in the laboratory, in the operating theatre, in the army barracks, in the university chair, in the factory, in the workshop, in the fields, in the home, and in all the immense panorama of work. Understand this well. There is something holy, something divine, hidden in the most ordinary situations, and it's up to each one of you to discover it." I love that. And so I was just, excuse me.
It absolutely nails it, doesn't it?
Because it came to mind while we were talking.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's why for the, if you like, for the average Catholic Christian out there in the world of work, whatever they do, it's about having that presence of mind about that spirituality, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Yeah. Even if in some situations, in a work situation, actually you're having a pretty difficult time with a task or a project or a colleague, or if, because that happens. We're all human, and things can go wrong or things can be difficult. But even when that happens, and maybe especially when that happens, what's God saying to you in this moment? How can I do believe in Christ. I do believe, Christ's Spirit is in me. So how can I be open to His movement to make this better? Or if I have to change, maybe I have to change. Maybe that's what the challenge is happening in the workspace. It's not. Yes, there can be difficult people, but maybe they're difficult for a reason. Sometimes our crosses do come on two legs. And we have to carry them. Yeah. But I think that spirituality of the ordinary, the extraordinary grace in the ordinariness of life, which is redolent in the spirituality of Jose Maria Escriva and so many other saints, is just that's it really. It's interesting. I'm been pursuing. I've done 10 weeks of it now. It's an 18-week program. It's a leadership formation program, a theological spiritual formation program based in the States, called Tepeyac Leadership. It's under the patronage of Our Lady of Guadalupe, Tepeyac. And it's a very intense program. It's 3 hours a week, every Tuesday night. And because I'm connected with the West Coast of America, they're all sitting down at 7 p.m. and I'm sitting down at 3 a.m. to do this, live Zoom virtual thing. And the first half is three lectures about a particular theme, and then there's Q&A, and then there's sharing. So it's very intense, but very good. And the one this last week was talking about this, about the how do you as a Catholic in your professional life, your working life, witness to your faith, and keep that going amidst the very anti-faith, anti-Christian, deeply anti-Catholic culture that's around us, particularly in the West. And one of the speakers, he put up a slide, and it was simple but very profound. There was a picture of just a normal guy, in a shirt and tie and whatever, and a picture of a priest below it. And it just said, this collar, i.e. the average white collar guy, this collar can go where this collar can't go, point with an arrow to the priest collar. And male or female, that's how we have to think of ourselves. How are we exercising a priestly prophetic witness in the culture, in the home, in the world of work, where Father Joe can't go, or he can, but it's not a natural habitat for him, as it were, outside of his ecclesiastical sphere. And that's an interesting angle to think about it in those terms. And indeed, when I was doing so much work to support marriage and family life and to big up parents, I would often quote St. John Paul II. He makes a reference to it in his document Familiaris Consortio, which is 40 years old now, where he talks about spouses are the priests of the domestic church. What does a priest do? A priest offers sacrifice and oblation. He lays down his life. Well, spouses do that for each other in the way they love each other, care for each other, support each other. And in using that typology, John Paul was actually quoting St. Thomas Aquinas. So it's a very old idea, if you like, that married couples have a priestly identity by virtue of their sacramental life together. But actually, when you dig into it, and I dig into it, when you go further back to the fathers like St. John Chrysostom, St. Augustine of Hippo in particular, he felt that, and he was reflecting after the death of his mother Monica, St. Monica, and the influence she had been on his life. She brought him to Christ, praying for his conversion in tears often. And it was only after her death, when he was now, a well-established bishop theologian, and he said, I now realize that the role of the parent is like unto a bishopric. So I often used to say, well, John Paul II said spouses are the priests of the domestic church. But if you become a parent, you're a bishop of the domestic church, because now you have a flock to care for, your children's souls, And you think, wow, that's huge. But it's also, it captures the imagination to think, wow, so as parents, we have children, we're blessed with children, we are bishops of our little diocese, which is our home and our family structure, and just as bishops are the chief shepherds in their diocese with their priests and have got to teach and preach and form consciences and souls, well, we in turn, as spouses and as parents, we have a role to form conscience, to teach, to preach, to guide, to catechize. It's not just left to the experts or those with the expertise. Yeah. We have an irreplaceable role that only we can do, and only we can do for that child, because God has given us this particular child or children. Yeah. They don't belong to anyone else. They're from us. They're the fruits of our love, but in his image and likeness, because he's ultimately their father. And you think, God is asking a lot of us, but God never asks anything of us that he doesn't give us the gifts to complete the task. Yeah. And so it's a two-pronged thing, isn't it? We've got to be open to the responsibility, not be daunted by it, knowing that if we embrace the responsibility and the duty with generosity of heart and some degree of diligence and vigilance, the gifts we need for that will come to the fore, you know. And as I said earlier, the great thing nowadays is that we're not alone in this calling. Yeah. You know, we can connect with so many others who also are trying to answer this call every day, you know. And as you know yourself, as a parent, it changes as each child goes through their particular phase of development, and so it's never boring. Challenging, but no, it's certainly never boring, you know.
That's it.
Yeah, so yeah,
and cynical, as you know, it's easy to be cynical about modern technology, and you know, that you've just been, and also this compulsory RSE. You know, at first it was, I think there was a bit of concern that where would that be taken, but actually these should be seen as opportunities. Like you say, you know, it's living in the world but not of it, and it's saying okay, this exists. There's a lot of bad things about it, but let's make good of it. Let's bring you know, it's opening up that space, which is quite right. It's right to be optimistic about, you know, I think I heard, was it I think Scott Hahn was in conversation with Matt Fradd last week, and they were talking with, I've forgotten his name, the guy who does Capturing Christianity. I can't remember, but anyway, he's on the verge of maybe thinking about becoming a Catholic, and he said one of the objections is bad popes. And Scott Hahn's response, I mean, it's a brilliant response, and it was much more detailed, but one of the things he said is that wherever there has been a bad pope, and there have been, let's not pretend otherwise, that that it has opened up this window where there's been reform and changes, and that it's, you know, that it's opened up this space for something good. So there will always be evil. We, you know, we live in a fallen world, and we're all sinners, and we're all human, and people who don't maybe necessarily understand Catholicism sometimes think that we worship the Pope, or certainly that we worship Mary, and of course we know God alone we worship. The Pope himself says he goes to confession, he's a human, he's a sinner. So it's not that we believe that the Pope and the clergy are God. But of course, there have been many, mostly good popes, but a few bad popes. But like I said about the internet and these things that on the face of it seem like a bad thing, they then open up this space for bringing good in, shining that light into the darkness. There was it reminds me of that wonderful phrase of Monsignor Ronald Knox, who I think again is one of those great writers of our tradition, and he because he himself was a convert, of course, and he said, if anyone who wants to kind of get on board the bark of Peter and be part of the crew, don't look too much in the engine room. You know, because it's, you know, because what is an engine room of a ship? Well, it's a dirty, smelly, oily, stinky place, you know, and you know, some pretty grim stuff has to happen down there in order for the ship to move. Well, what do we think the Ark was like? Quite. So, you know, it's about this is why St. Paul's image of the church as the human body, you know, Christ is the head, we are the members, and a body gets sick from time to time, you know, and sometimes seriously sick, and therefore, you know, the healthier parts of the body, the healthier cells in the body are, you know, as we know, and you don't have to be an expert in medical physiology for this, without those healthier cells, the sick cells and the sick parts of the body can't recover. And it's the same when we think about the mystical body of Christ. You know, we are all called to strive to be as holy as we possibly can be. Yes, we're going to fail, we're going to sin, we're going to maybe sometimes sin very badly, but that's the beauty of reconciliation. It's the beauty of God's ocean of mercy, which is always open to us, so that we can be channels of mercy to others, and therefore help our sick brothers and sisters by our example, by our concern, by our compassion. You know, always loving the sinner, hating the sin, but loving the sinner. You know? It's that both and, isn't it? It's absolutely. this idea, and I think people, sometimes in the culture there's this criticism. You've seen it quite recently with some of the criticisms leveled at Catholic schools, and there is a faction of society that would like to do away with religious schools. But the teaching calls us to a higher standard. It calls us to be authentically free. It's beautiful, really, the teaching of our faith. And yes, so the bar is high, if you want to put it like that. But at the same time, you have someone like Mother Teresa, who was pulling children out of bins and who helped set up the first AIDS clinic at a time when people were shunning people with AIDS. So here's someone who takes very seriously her faith, which does have these high ideals, and says, to be free, to become the person that God has called you to be. You are called to live in sanctity, live in holiness, and but at the same time reaching out and seeing the face of Christ in everyone, in the rejected, in the forgotten, in the dirty and the smelly and the impoverished and those that we are people,
and the amoral,
and the amoral,
because they don't know, they've never heard any other message.
Intransigent with sin and indulgent with the sinner, Pope Benedict said, Pope Benedict XVI. So definitely it's that both and the church isn't just, the way people may see it, criticism and exclusion. It's not at all. It's just so misunderstood.
Exactly. It's like I can't remember who coined the phrase now. It's been used a lot by lots of different theologians and speakers, but it's not that the church says no to this, that, and the other. It's inviting you to say a big yes to a much richer life. And if you don't believe us that's possible and true, because you look at the church today and you see hypocrisy, scandal, or whatever, fair enough, because that's a reality, then we invite you to look at the lives of the saints. Look, these are individuals who been there, wore the t-shirt, got the video, and are in heaven as redeemed sinners, but they walked the path of holiness, and in different stages of world history and church history, through very difficult times. We think sometimes, we're having a tough time now in the 21st century, and we are, relatively speaking. But when you look back at times of, plague and war and devastation and all sorts of horrible, nasty things in the past, and yet God raised up saints, amazing saints in those very difficult times, to be beacons of hope and virtue. And they're always there. They're out there. So I do think, it behooves us, as certainly as parents, and anyone who's got any kind of responsibility for the formation of others, particularly young people. And obviously, I'm thinking particularly here of Catholic schools, and they do this, but I think there could be more of it. Let's explore this rich spiritual patrimony of the lives of the saints who've gone before us, to say, look at this saint, look at this particular saint, and what they went through, and the difficulties they had, and the amazing things that God achieved through them. Wow, and they're not some kind of plaster cast statue that is far removed from us. They were real people, and they're as real today because they're our friends in heaven. And they are just waiting for us to call upon them, to ask for their intercession and their help. And I think you can explore that with young people in a really useful way. I mean, let's face it, we've all got one of these. That's a bit battered, this thing now. But, kids have these, they're on the WhatsApp groups, they're on the whatever apps, connecting with people. And they really believe that, if they lost their phone, oh my goodness, life would be devastating. What would they do without their virtual connections? Well, if kids have no problem understanding the value of connectivity with the people they care about, and they care about them through a device, then we should be able to convince them that it's possible to connect with the unseen saints in heaven through prayer, which is faster than a phone, more reliable than a phone, and it's just as real. So let's dig into that.
And to tell them that is their destiny. I remember talking to them at school, doing an assembly about saints, and when I said, you are called to be a saint, you know, Saint Stephen of Stevenage and Saint,
Mm.
you know, whatever, Nigel of Northampton. And it doesn't even have to be
Yeah.
alliterative, you know, you are called
Yeah.
that's, they looked at me and
Yeah.
suddenly said, that, are we? No,
Yeah.
they didn't know. That was the first time they
Yeah.
heard that is their calling. And so
Yeah.
you're quite right. Let's look at the lives of the saints, and God will raise saints in response to the culture,
To the needs of the time.
yeah,
Absolutely.
the time. And so
Yeah.
in times of
Yeah.
gluttony, he will raise great saints who
Yeah.
fast. And in
Well,
times
that's the beauty, isn't it? It's the beauty of
Yeah.
some of the more recent, and if you like, modern saints, like, you know, Pier Giorgio Frassati and the more, obviously the very recent one, Blessed Carlo Cootis, you know, that young 14-year-old, 15-year-old boy who you think, wow, you know, he was born in 2002 or something, or whatever it was, you know, or 1998 in London. So although he's got a very Italian name and lived and was educated in Italy, he was born in London. So you could even explore with kids in this country, you know, he was English born, but he had this great love for Christ in the Eucharist, you know, and he was just a normal lad, just like you. He went to school, he had mates, you know, he dressed in jeans and t-shirt, you know, and it's just, yeah, how could you not get kids, you know, more interested in sainthood with a figure like that? Of course you can, especially as only in the last couple of decades, and you may think, wow, you know.
I'm going to be talking actually next, or a couple of weeks time, to Peter Strode, who is the brother of Michael Strode, who set up HCPT, and I think there's a committee looking at his potential canonization.
His cause. Oh, fantastic.
His cause for canonization. So I'll be talking to his brother about Michael's life. But yeah, just
marvelous.
Making it real, that, you know, that
making it real.
Ordinary people, you and I, in our sinfulness, you know, yes, we're sinners, but we say by the grace of God. It's not that you know, you need to be perfect first. And then, you know, this is even when it comes to religion, sometimes I know people who are on a journey, who are almost there, and they say, I won't be able to become a Christian or go to church until I'm absolutely sure. And sometimes it's a little bit the other way around. Why not? There's something to be said for doing, and in the doing, then you are given the grace to understand. Because if you have to understand everything first, it's that doubting Thomas, isn't it? It's until I'm absolutely sure of this, I can't jump aboard. I'm like, jump aboard, and you'll be given the grace to understand. You know,
you're absolutely right, and it's the same of everything in life, but particularly, you know, beautiful and big things in life. You know, it's like, you know, in the past, I've worked a lot with the Marriage Foundation, and their head of research, and his name escapes me for the moment now, but he's done a lot of research into the culture and issue of cohabitation vis-a-vis marriage, and we've got those who just cohabit and never get married, and those who married, and those who cohabited before they got married. But, you know, he said at the end of the day, you know, there's no getting away from, leaving faith and religion aside, there's no getting away from the fact, and all the evidence points that, you know, marriage is better than cohabitation on so many different levels, especially if there's children involved. But also, what's preventing people who are cohabiting from getting married or choosing cohabitation instead of marriage? And it's the commitment phobia, you know, which is often sad to say, a man problem. It's a man issue. This fear of, I've got, everything's got to be in place first before I, you know. And where's that coming from? That's coming from a place of actually deep insecurity, because we think we have to be in control of everything, every last detail. And if every last detail isn't just how we want it, then we're not going to take that step. And a book I've been reading more recently about the future of Christian marriage by Mark Regnerus, who is a professor of social theory out in Texas, and he says the problem is our model, the model of culture, the culture of marriages, has upended itself. So we've gone from marriage is now the pinnacle, it's the end goal of all that we aim to, but it actually should be the foundation. It should be the keystone from which all the other choices you make in life flow. So and that's why people get married later, et cetera, et cetera. Want the career established, they want the mortgage and the house and all that kind of stuff. Now, on one level, you can understand all that, but actually leaving marriage much later, not taking the plunge, let's say in your early to mid-20s, is actually in the end making it harder for yourself, because you can grow so much more in the vocation, in, as you say, by the doing. You learn in the doing, because the commitment's there. The framework's been established, whereas the cohabiting framework is loose, ambiguous. Will it last? Will it last? Yeah, we've been together several years, but and you're trying to juggle all of these big decisions in life about your job, your mortgage, your health, or whatever, and it's not within the solid framework of a lifelong commitment. It's an understanding, and that leaves people very vulnerable. Even though they think they're in control of their lives, they're not actually. On a deep subconscious psychological level, they're leaving themselves more vulnerable than they need be. So hopefully there'll be people will just see it for what it is, and there'll be a renaissance, I hope, of marriage in society in general. But if the church can't lead the way on promoting that renaissance, who can? For goodness sake, that. And I fear we're slightly holding back on the message for fear of upsetting those who are very vocal about the LGBT agenda and all of those kind of things. I think we can almost park those neuralgic issues, whilst we promote and advocate for what has been the vision of Christ from time immemorial. After all, his first public miracle was at a wedding. That was no accident. Christ chose to change the water into wine at the wedding feast of Cana as his first public manifestation of his divinity, for a reason, because it's saying something undeniably profound about the centrality of marriage between a man and a woman in God's plan for salvation, not just of the couple, but of the entire human race. So if the church isn't holding that up all the time as the icon it's meant to be, then it's not just doing a disservice to its own members, it's doing a great disservice to humanity as a whole. And
marriage is something given. It's something natural. It is something, like you say, this imagery, this of marriage, the bride and the bridegroom, Israel and God, the church and Jesus and Christ. So everything is under this, is typified under this idea of the bride of marriage. And I'm thinking in civil marriage now, it's so easy to get divorced. I mean, I think it's easier to get divorced than it probably is to get out of your phone contract. Really, which is it's so sad. Like, I really think that's so sad. That actually what the church offers, this vision of what marriage is, that we discover what marriage is. We don't decide what marriage is. It isn't just, well, this year marriage is this, and then let's change our mind, and 10 years down the line people would like it to be like this. It's something that we are given. It's something natural that we come to understand, and something holy. And so what the church teaches about marriage is so beautiful, and it does offer something that the culture doesn't offer. Because what does the culture offer? Really, what's it offering? If it's you cohabit,
well, it's the culture.
Get married, you can get divorced.
Yeah, the culture, Catherine, offers what it's always offered. It's anti-gospel, if you like. That's never changed from the Garden of Eden. It's just more sophisticated. It's articulated in a more sophisticated 24/7 way now, which is, if it feels good, do it. That's the anti-gospel. And what does the vision of marital commitment say in all walks of life, but particularly in the Christian sacramental sign, is that love is not just a feeling. In fact, ultimately, love is a decision. And the longer you're married, the more that's true. Sometimes you choose to love, even when, and perhaps especially when, you don't feel particularly lovable towards this person you've committed your life to, because they're just, human, and they, drive you mad and all the rest of it. But it's love is a decision. And one of the things I always say to my children, well, I say it particularly to my son, who's, will be 13 soon, so he'll be hearing it more often, is, feelings follow actions. Always remember that feelings follow actions. So if you're choosing good actions, like to help someone, to put a bit of extra spurt into your team sport or whatever, and even particularly if you don't particularly feel like it, if you choose to do that good action, the feeling, the buzz will follow. Don't wait for the buzz. Don't wait for the buzz to do a good action. Do the good action first, and the buzz, which is the Holy Spirit, will come. So, and I think that's true. It's true for everything. But it's certainly true for our relationships. It's particularly true for marriage, and for those aspiring to marriage. And it's a lifelong journey of, daily, sometimes hourly choices and decisions to love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's, as John Paul famously said, the opposite of love is not to hate. The opposite of love is indifference, or to use. To use someone is the opposite of love. So therefore, what's the counteract value to that? Well, to choose to love, to decide to love and serve, rather than use someone or treat someone with indifference. That's authentic love. Well, that's agape. Just that's as your initiative calls itself, Choose Agape. That's it. It's self-sacrificing victimal love, and yet sometimes you're not going to feel like doing it. You don't really feel like being victimal, but it's the way to go.
And if both people are doing that, one is making sacrifices to for the good of the other, and the other is then the needs are met, in that self-sacrificial love, in that self-giving love. Quite right. People are very good at telling Christians, didn't Jesus say love one another? And we say, yeah, he did. He didn't just say it, he commanded it. He commanded it. Now, you can't command a feeling. You can't you can't just say switch your feeling on and off. So we know there's something else going on, which is part of why I wanted to go with this. Where is it? Choose Agape. Because I was seeing around people, that this T-shirt, choose love, and it's such a misunderstood word. And like you say, it's difficult. It's not that Catholic couples are skipping through the sunset every day is blissful. We face the same problems as everyone else, but first of all, we invite God into our marriage and say, look, I'm struggling. I need your help. And then, you get to the sacraments, you get to confession, you leave those sins at the feet of Christ. You return like the prodigal son and be enveloped in God's love and God's mercy. And then you're renewed. It's a constant renewal throughout, if it's 10 years, 20 years, however many years God wants us.
And if you've got children, if you've been blessed with children as well, it's a remarkable how your children minister to you. There's such, your children are such sources of love in your life, aren't they? And they in their own unique way, and they bring such joy in your life. And sometimes, often for me, when I've been really down at heart or down at heel, or I'm just feeling kind of somewhat alone in my struggles, it's often been my children who've just lifted me up when I needed it most, and both, or my wife as well, and for both of us. And you think, you can't even quantify the gift they are, and it's just amazing. And if for some reason couples haven't been blessed with children, and that's a truly enormous cross, they are called to exercise a motherhood and paternity to other children they know, because it's I feel it's very important to have lots of really good Christian adults outside of our family, but connected with us through friendships, who are also good influence, positive influences on my children's development. So it's not just me and my wife who are saying this, they're getting their message echoed by others, or they're just interacting with good, wholesome people with good values, who are married and share that commitment and have that respect and awe for the value of married life. They're immersed in that culture.
They're a real blessing. They having children, and thanks be to God, like you say, it's across, many people cannot have children, but they are such a great gift and such a great blessing. And what worries me is that too often young people are made to feel guilty for even wanting children.
Yeah.
Or you hear that, you're going to have no money left, and you're going to not go out with your friends, and it's like these things are so insignificant that there's not enough of a positive message to young people. And I've noticed in schools, especially with young women, there's a great emphasis on trying to get more women into STEM, into science and technology, and you too could be a CEO, and you're just as equally capable as a man. And of course a woman is equally capable as a man and equally valuable as a man, but at the same time I think there's a place for saying, but what's also another beautiful thing that a woman can do is to have children and to become
exactly. A man is not equally capable of being a mother.
No.
Aside from all of the the controversial issues around transgender and all that kind of stuff, and birthing parent, it's a simple biological fact that only a woman can be a mother, which is a unique calling from God. And again, it's about helping young people, young girls in particular, begin to embrace, I think from a tender age actually, to embrace that, why has God made me a woman? What is it about my femininity and this a potential eventually capacity I will have to give life, to be a life bearer? Why me? Why has God called me to this? And it's just to help young girls, young women feel incredibly special in the eyes of God by virtue of just being woman. Again, John Paul was just so brilliant on that the feminine genius and all that kind of stuff, and we need to explore that language and those ideas with young people, especially girls, who are they have a particular struggle, I think, in the anti-life culture today. Everything's so horribly sexualized, and that they're prone to all sorts of negative influences that they kind of buy into, or they feel under peer pressure to buy into it.
Excuse me.
And yet they just need to be affirmed, like massively affirmed, in the beauty that is their femininity. And that's the beauty is inside as much as outside. In fact, it is inside, and girls particularly need to hear that, because the culture screams at them they've got to have particular clothes, or they've got to have particular makeup, or they've got to look a particular way, and it's nothing wrong with wanting to be pretty and attractive and all of but everything in perspective, and actually your beauty will shine from within. It will be attractive because of your spirituality, that you I suppose that's why in the Fertile Heart program we go, especially when we get into the adolescent stage, we go into a lot about personhood. What is your personhood? It's something unique about you. It's not just your personality traits, though they're important. It's deeper than that. Your personhood is you as a unique, unrepeatable soul. Your personality is the personality of Jesus. And that will be different for girls and different for boys. But it's an incredibly, awe-inspiring thing, and your femininity and your masculinity are all part of that story, all part of you understanding who you are and who you can be for others. More important. And be, as we say, you have to be comfortable in your own skin, and that's probably more important for teenagers nowadays than it is ever before, with the whole transgender debate going on. We want you to be comfortable in your own skin. this body, your body is you.
Yeah.
And Christ died for you, body and soul, on the cross. So your body is a very beautiful thing. You're a temple of the Holy Spirit. Fill that temple with grace, with love, with the best aspirations, the best ideas, the best ambitions. St. Paul says, think of the higher gifts, aspire to the higher gifts, outdo each other in love. That would be an interesting challenge to a year 9 class on a Friday. How are you going to outdo each other in love this weekend?
Yeah.
Don't wait for your parents to nag you to put the bins out. Just choose to do it. Don't wait to set the table.
It's always the bins. It's always the bins. I think the prophetic voice of the church is needed more now than ever. I really think so. And it's just so beautiful. And the program that you've shared with us today is such a beautiful program. And since the introduction of the contraceptive pill, again, the church has criticized you won't allow contraception, but what does it do but make women constantly sexually available? And I think there is so much to be said in the teachings of the church that at first glance, prima facie, they seem like just so wrong or unfair, but just look deeper. I would say just dig deeper and say why, because at the heart of everything is that you are worth so much more than
absolutely.
you
and this is why and I've said this in different circles, not just in Catholic schools, but indeed any school. I think actually young people have a right, particularly girls, they have a right to be taught, if you like, or at least given some guidance on the amazing gift that is their fertility cycle. Once they've reached a particular age, post-pubescent, this is something that young girls have to live with. And for some it will be more difficult than others because that's the development's can be very tough, a very tough time, and because it's tough and can be very challenging, and also boys need to understand the delicacy of it all as well. Then let's talk to our young people about this incredible, the physiology of it all. It's amazing. You are awesomely and wonderfully made by God, and the learning to understand how to track the female cycle. And I know instances where some schools have done this very, very well with expert help to help girls to begin to appreciate how their body works. They feel more connected with this thing that's a bit scary sometimes, or a bit debilitating even. But actually, if I roll with it and actually understand how it can affect my mood swings and my energy levels and everything else, it's not something I need to be afraid of all the time. And actually, I will begin to cherish it more and make sure that the boys I know and who want to interact with me cherish it even more. It's because this is a very delicate thing, and I also often used to say to kids when I worked in schools, fertility is not a given. We can assume that later in life we'll be fertile, please God, and when we get married and we have children, but it's not a given. It's a very delicate commodity, and we're a finely tuned instrument as human beings, both not just female fertility but male fertility as well. And a healthy lifestyle, having a healthy attitude, living a wholesome life, which is about the virtuous life, begins now. Even when you're only 13, 14, you're not even thinking about marriage for like another 20 years or whatever. Of course you're not. But you have to take care of your body now, appreciate your body now as a gift from God. And this particular aspect of your body, this capacity to reproduce in God's good time and in the right context, you need to be formed in, because it will be unique to you. And it then also helps you understand what makes other people tick as well. Kate, without wanting to in any way appear crude, but you'd say, well, I'd much rather schools taught young people how to track fertility than stick condoms on bananas, frankly, because, one is just reductionist and frankly, it does a great disservice to our young people. It's basically telling people, look, you've got these animal instincts, and you're probably going to act on them in an animalistic way. You can't control yourselves, but so whatever happens, be safe. Oh, and make sure you consent. I mean, what a minimalist, boring thing to say to young people.
It's just
not just
really
in
low
Catholic schools, but any school.
Really
Do our young people not deserve
yeah.
a much higher, more enriching message? Of course they do.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
Yeah, and a message that says, actually, what does it mean as a young man to be strong? What does it mean? Look to Jesus, who's a perfect model. And did he go around? This sort of, you alluded to this utilitarian kind of swine ethic of just pleasure seeking. Our sovereign masters of pleasure and pain, avoid pain and seek pleasure, and that's it. And it's like appealing to this sort of lower base mentality. And I think actually let's look to Jesus, who honored women, who respected women, who raised women up, daughters of Abraham, which was a term not used, only sons of and who made sacrifices for love of others. So a young man who forms those habits, again, that's all in this great program, I know, because I'm familiar with it. How can it be accused of contributing to a abusive culture or something? The opposite is true. The opposite.
I know.
It says what we're calling you to do is to show self-restraint, to respect a woman, and for a woman also to respect herself, and like you said, so I think, basically, people who see the headlines and the just look for everything, just dig deeper, just look deeper.
Yeah, the problem is, Catherine, is that it's not just with the challenges that the Fertile Heart Programme faces, but the message of the church generally about human sexuality and marriage and family, as we've been speaking about, is that, as soon as you venture into the territory of the undeniable fact of sexual difference, the heckles are up. You're exclusionary, and all of that starts to kind of explode, and you think, really, if we can't have a calm, intelligent, objective discussion about the reality of human life and living, which we've known since time immemorial, then as a civilization, never mind as a society, we're in a very bad state. Very bad state. Now, we are actually thankfully seeing pushback, and that's a good thing. We're seeing pushback against the dominant and domineering narrative, and that's okay. But it shouldn't always be pushed back. We need an ambience of calm. And actually, John Paul spoke about this often in his teachings. If there can't be, you can't even begin to explore the virtue of chastity and purity and self-control with anyone, especially young people, unless it's already an atmosphere of calm, non-judgmental ambience, where these things can be discussed and shared, and people can disagree with them or they can challenge them, but it has to be in an ambience of calm. So that's what hopefully our material does, is it says, yes, we're not denying this stuff is quite difficult to explore in the culture we live in, but in the right setting, a PSHE lesson or an RE lesson or an RSE lesson or whatever, that should be an agreed space where we can discuss these things, even if they're, a point of contention or whatever. This is a space where we can discuss them intelligently, calmly, share views, listen to one another, etc., etc. No one's ramming anything down someone's throat. We're proposing a vision for life here. And what I try to say to teachers in particular, in the hope that they feel more comfortable with the material, is that, remember, there's no attainment on this. This is the one subject, the one material where there'll be no marking, there'll be no exam or test at the end of term. There'll be, so you can't, and you don't have to lesson plan. All the stuff's done for you. You click and go, and if during the conversation with a year 10 class or a year 11 class or whatever, you know, a question comes up with a pupil that you genuinely don't know the answer to, you're in the space where you can say, actually, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But maybe we can discuss that next time and I'll find out the answer for you, you know. And you can say that in all humility to your students.
Yeah.
And they're not going to think less of you. In fact, they'll think more of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're saying, actually, yes, I'm the teacher in this context and I've got to lead and facilitate the conversation, but we're actually learning something together here.
Yeah.
It's a formational exercise, a formational experience for all of us, including me, your teacher. Now, you wouldn't necessarily need to say that to your students, but if that's your mindset going into that classroom, particularly if you're not well versed in the theology, or you're not even a Catholic, then you're more likely to see fruits of the work over a period of time.
Truth is important as well. You're saying, look, I don't know, and instead of fobbing you off with some answer that may or may not be true or right, I'm going to give you a true answer. I'm going to get to the truth.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
Edmund, thank you so much. I think for time, we'll draw it to an end. It's been
sure. It's been great to speak to you.
Really great speaking to you, and I hope you'll join me again because there's so much else I'd love to dig into. I'd love to dig further into Humane Vitae with you.
Love to, yeah.
Theology of the body, what you know, family and marriage, and so I would really love to catch up with you again. But for today,
let's do that.
Thank you so much. It's been
thank you very much. And a happy Easter to you and your family. And let's just keep move forward in faith and hold each other in prayer as well. Thanks, Catherine.
Definitely. Okay. Well,
God bless. Bye for now.
Bye bye.